of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sherry. We only have one item on the agenda, and this is a work session. That item is a council and staff discussion on Cave Creek performance measures presented by the Bridge Group, Mike and Bill.
Thank you. I think I'm going to start. In fact, I know I am, otherwise I wouldn't be standing here. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us back. Been a long journey since we started this with the staff back in February. We are going to try to be really efficient with the time that we have. The plan for us is to really just show you a quick overview of what we walked the staff through, our process with a few PowerPoint slides, and then we'll actually get into the performance measures themselves as we work with the staff on that. We hope to hit the 4:30 mark. So that's our intent. Although I gotta be honest with you, I have 5 o'clock on my calendar, so we'll see how this goes. But we wanted to talk about really the journey of performance measurement was one with the staff. That crawl, walk, run kind of process. You have to, as we did, we have to keep in mind that the staff has not been measuring much of the performance in a very dedicated way as we have proposed with them. So some of the measures are pretty easy. They're softballs. Some of them are a little bit harder as we go through to make sure that we are measuring things that are important. But we also are trying to ensure that the staff can take this journey themselves and really get used to measuring and kind of going through it. I think we look at all of your personal experiences with performance measurement. Some of you are very, very advanced, and some of the staff is at the elementary level. So we've got to try to find measures that get everybody eventually to the same and the correct point. We look at performance measurement as a continuous improvement process. So we'll always be looking to move the needle. That's really the kind of point of this. And then our hope is that by the time we finish today, as we go through those, we reach some level of consensus with, yeah, these are pretty good. In the future, we'd like to see X. I think that's a good target for the staff to understand. But for us as the elected body and for the staff moving forward, just making sure that we've got this kind of worked out going forward. So for us, for Mike and I, performance measurement is really, if you haven't gleaned it already, Mike and I are very process-driven people. So everything has got a nice little outline to it. We look at this from benchmarking what are other communities doing in regard to their performance measurement. One of the keys with this that we looked at was if a staff member here has a question about their performance measurement and how to, or where do I get, or how are you guys calculating? We wanted to bring some performance measures that were similar to others here in the Valley, that they could reach out to Scottsdale or to Phoenix or Tempe or somebody and say, hey, how are you guys measuring that? Because we're really struggling with X. And we let the staff do that. So we try to bring some of those parallel with one another. In addition to that, we want to use some, as we refer to, industry best practice and benchmark. So some of the individual measures may or may not be exactly how you would want it, but they are from the industry. So we wanted to bring some parallel in that regard as well. Setting performance targets are things that we're going to be able to do once you have figured out what your benchmark is. Then you can work on your improvement piece from there. So, for example, you may not know right now what your current water loss is in a particular area. But once you measure it for the year, then you'll know what that is. And then you can set your performance target from that. So some of these areas you know nothing, and in others, you know some. So we kind of baselined and flatlined everything and kind of moved from there. The most important piece of this, as we expressed to the staff, is you're not just measuring this, but we also have to deliver it. So you should be receiving, I think we left it at quarterly reports that you get based on these measures, so that you can see very regularly. No sense in having a measure if we're not going to utilize it and then report on it. It's kind of been our philosophy going forward. We talk about why do we do performance measurement? We have talked to you when we did the strategic planning process. Why is a very important piece of this. It's really about accountability, transparency. It's about making, as we say, I hate to use the buzzword data-based decision-making, but the data is really important. And we don't want to be making decisions exclusively on intuition, and we need to have it backed up with a little bit of what's our local experience. And then we can start doing some goal setting as we get some alignment going with that. And we talk about competitiveness and growth, which is essentially that continuous improvement process. And that's really the ultimate goal of why we do performance measures. And then we get into what are we doing? We spend a great deal of time with the staff, not just creating the performance measures, but also training with them on how are we collecting them? How are we calculating them? How are we to try to give them a better understanding rather than we are simply just counting widgets. We don't want to be just counting things. We want to have things that are important. And we had a great dialogue back and forth when we did our workshop back in, I think it was early March. Actually, it was February. I was just going to say it was February because I turned 60 between the time we did that and now. So my memory of things is much worse than it was when we were here earlier.
Doesn't get better.
That's what everybody tells me. They're like, you're at your pinnacle right now. It's only going to get worse. So anyway, we did walk through a great journey on how do we go through this process. And we even had some times where they said, well, shouldn't we be measuring X? And we said, no, we don't want to go that far. We pulled back a little bit, come up a little bit higher, and really kind of walked through a very good journey with the staff. So I think when we walked out of here, I think they felt good about it. I think we felt pretty good about the measures that we created and the process that we're going through. So that's a little bit about how we went through it. Just a very rudimentary perspective. There are three primary types of measures. One is the input, which are the resources that we're using. The other is the output, or what is the activity that is a result of that, that's really the widget counting is the output piece. And then we have the outcome, which is the result of that activity. And that's really where we take these measures and we can make better decisions going forward, and we can start setting some performance targets. Right now we have zero information in a lot of cases, not in all, but we want to make sure that once we establish those baselines, like I said before, we've got a place to kind of go forward. So we also talk about benchmarking, which is how do we compare against other communities, other local communities, and then those nationally, which we are able to use the International City Managers Association benchmarks. Some of those are engaged here. Those are very important that we're trying to do comparables across our universe. We all come to our elected positions with different perspectives, some from business, some from federal government, some from other, government agencies, and they're all a little bit, everything's just a tad different. So we're using the ICMA benchmarks as a good baseline for us to go forward. And then as the staff evolves in their journey in measuring, then we can start elevating some of the expectations. The other piece is performance targets. Those are those very specific goals that we're looking to achieve as a result of what we're trying to measure. And I think when you look at the things that are important to you as a community, as we've learned having worked with you now for the better part of a year, those things that are important to you are the targets that we want to try to set to make sure that you're achieving the desired results for your community, because that's at the end of the day the most important thing. My favorite slide in the whole wide world is we also had to make sure that we were balancing the staff's time and their resources to make sure that what we produced was scalable to the city of Cave Creek. You don't have a lot of resources, so we can't dedicate a whole lot of time to measuring everything. So we picked things that were very important that would give you the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak. And that's kind of where we took this teeter-totter approach to this going forward. Most importantly, at the end of the day, this is about continuous improvement. We're not measuring anything for the sake of measuring it. We really want to achieve something. So our philosophy, and as we explained with the staff, is really about this continuous improvement. The plan, do, check, act cycle, that circle, which you'll, I think, see here in a minute, for us is a really important component of this. And we spent a lot of time with the staff talking about that. That is really critical and essential to a good performance measurement system. I have been in a community that had almost 1,000 performance measurements, and it was a colossal waste of staff time. They were measuring everything, and only about 10% of it really mattered. So communities can take performance measurement too far, and then, or we measure the stuff that's really easy, and we don't move the needle in our continuous improvement process, that we've chosen measurements that are irrelevant. So we really wanted to make sure that we kind of got the best of both worlds. We gave some easy ones in there to get everybody used to it, and then we put some ones in there that will move the needle. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mike, kind of walk through some of the process here, and then we're going to actually get into the measurements themselves. So any question before I turn it over to Mike on how we got here? Okay. Take your stunned silence.
Yeah, appreciate it. Mayor, council member, good to be here this afternoon. What I want to do is give you a frame of how we develop these measures. I've just got a few slides, and then we're going to actually put up the measures themselves and kind of take you through them and find which ones that you might want to make adjustments in, or the ones that look okay, and we'll move ahead. The first thing that we wanted to do is to make sure that we had a matrix. When we were discussing developing the measures with the staff, we wanted to make sure that, is this a good measure or is it not a good measure in terms of considering for the town of Cave Creek? And so the thing we started out with, these were the items, we had what we call the 80-20 rule. Will it really make a difference? Will this measure really make a difference in the town's performance and delivery of service? We wanted to keep it simple. Like Bill said, measures can be really complex, but we think the group of measures that we've developed, in fact, I was counting them, I think you've got close to 38 measures, are simple, but they can also, they'll have a big impact on the town. You know, if they're relevant, is the measure relevant? If you're a citizen and you say, we're measuring this, is this something that's relevant from a citizen perspective? Well, we think that as we go through these, that's one of the things that was a criteria that we use. We also said, is it aligned with your focus areas and guiding principles that the council's already approved as part of the budget, or excuse me, the strategic plan? Is it an actionable item? It's something that we can actually act on to change, to improve. And then finally, can it promote continuous improvement? I was in a kind of a similar organization to Bill in Massachusetts, and we had our finance director. I think it's a finance director. You're a wonderful finance director from what I hear. I'll give you, yeah, that's good. We had a finance director, a Harvard graduate, MBA, brilliant guy, but we had irrelevant measures. And I remember meeting with him and the manager at a meeting, and he was real upset that I hadn't updated my measures. And I finally just said, look, they're irrelevant. I mean, why are we doing this? As soon as this guy left, we stopped doing, 3/4 of them. So we wanted to be sure in developing measures for the town that they're something that you can act on, that they can be used for what they're designed for, as the mayor's mentioned a number of times, continuous improvement. So when we go through this today, we want, in the chart that we developed, is who is responsible for the measure, what the measure is, what's being collected, because it's not just who is doing it, but it's really important if a citizen picks up this document, they know what's being measured, how it's going to be measured, and why we're doing it are the criteria we used. We'll move to the facilitation guide in a minute, starting on page 9. If you have not the facilitation guide, the workbook, we'll start on page 9, and Bill will put that up in a minute. But one of the things we emphasize to staff before we get to that is that these quarterly meetings are meetings not only to look at the measures and how those measures are performing for the town and to discuss those measures with you, but also an opportunity, if they're measures that aren't meeting quite up to where they should be, it's an opportunity to go back and look at what can we change? What can we improve? What is it a process issue? Is it a procedure issue? Is it a staff issue? Is it a, whatever issue? To start looking at the root cause so that they can be improved. So when Bill pulls these up, I'm gonna go through them. I'm gonna mention the measure, ask if there's any questions, and then we're gonna move directly to the next measure. Thanks, Bill. As Bill knows, my eyesight is not that great. So we'll start out. The first one is in town clerk's area. Any questions before I move ahead? Mayor and council. The first one is in the town clerk's area. Measure we're looking at is under economic vitality, and it's measuring the percentage of public records requests completed within the stated goal of 10 business days. Now, you may say, really? If I have a public records request, I want to get that request. That may be my one contact that I have with the city. So it's an important item to measure to make sure that it's tracked. Any questions on that one, council? Okay, next one is percentage of townwide compliance with records and information management guidelines. And that's to comply with the legal statutory requirements of your records. It's something I think you might want to keep an eye on.
Before we go any farther, the bold on the very right-hand side of the screen, you want to talk about what that is?
Oh, yeah, I can.
Just so.
Yeah, thanks. The bold items, as you remember, Bill in a presentation talked about outputs and targets. So each one of these, we have an indication if it's an output measure, which this is, and it's also a target metric because it's 10 business days. So those are there throughout the report. You'll see some, we've got on this page, primarily output, but there's also outcome measures as part of this too. Thanks, Bill. Okay. Next item is annual training and periodic policy updates for records and information management guidelines. Any questions on that? That's under, again, the town clerk. Now moving to the CIP projects. Very, very important measure. The percentage of projects completed on time and within contract amount. Finance is the close of general ledger within 10 days of month end. And these next two, even though they seem, I know the town has both of them, but it's something I think you want to track to make sure that they're maintained, as your GFOA Excellence Awards. Hats off to you for the Financial Excellence Awards that you've received, and also your Budget Presentation Awards. Two measures I think you want to keep an eye on. Moving to page 10. Your percentage of AP invoices processed within 30 business days. I know as a consultant, a contractor, we appreciate being paid within 30 days. I won't mention other clients that we have that go beyond that, but it's a big factor. It's something important to track because in some cases, the vendors will add additional cost. If you're not pay, if they know that you're going to pay 45 or 60 days, you're going to pay more for the services that you receive. So that's a good measure to track. The other one is a really, really important measure under fiscal sustainability is the percentage of delinquent utility accounts over 60 days. Really, really important to track. Also, we want to look at the town does have funds that it invests. We want to track those investments. And again, this is an output target metric. We want to track those investments and make sure that we're at least getting a return on a 3-year treasury bill, which is, any questions on those, Mayor Council? Okay.
So these two are in green, and there are 2 others later in the document that are in green. These are the 4 measures that were added following the work with the staff based on comments that we received from the mayor and council. So that's why they're in a slightly different color. We needed to call them out for everyone's benefit for today's discussion. They'll be black and white, just like the rest of them if once we get through the rest of the day, but that's why they're in a different color.
Could I just have a point of clarification? I don't understand why all of these items are under town clerk.
Oh, they're
They're not?
Sorry.
Starts out with
I-
town clerk.
If you look on the,
CIP.
Right here.
The fine.
Yeah, the
Okay,
bold town
right,
clerk
so
finance.
bolded.
blame me for that. I should have, when I started going to,
I should
he's,
have.
blame Mike. Yeah. So let's go to fire. These are fire metrics. Now I'll start stating what the departments are. So this is percentage of all structure fires contained within the room of origin. We want to track that. And that is a benchmark metric. It's a national metric that's tracked.
Jim, we actually, I think somehow that got in the presentation, but I think in the packet that was removed. And so, Jim, did you want to just kind of explain why that was, staff reconsidered that and thought maybe it was actually not quite as important?
I'm sorry that you don't have the notes. We can have them here if you want to see. The 3 for fire, the room of origin was transferred to brush fires. So in our performance measures, we're looking at wildland fires, we're looking at structure fires, and we're looking at EMS, which is 70 to 80% of our calls. So Mike, these are the 3 that we changed it to. So the first one's actually track and evaluate the impact of all brush fires and wildland fires in the town of Cave Creek. And we're going to track the number, we're going to track the amount of acreage, we're going to track the amount of homes threatened and the amount of homes lost. And we'll keep a good track of that every year to see how we're doing. And if the measures we put in place are able to handle the wildfire issues that we have in Cave Creek. The second one is the structure one, and it's percentage of all fires contained to the structure of origin. There's 2 ways to track it. One is the room of origin, one's the structure of origin. The room of origin is more came from the city of Scottsdale, where they have residential sprinklers everywhere. We have some here too, but we don't have as many things that we track. But that's where the room of origin would be contained. Here, it's the structures of origin. We don't want it to spread from one structure to another, whether that's downtown or whether from the structure to the wildland fire. And then the third one is percentage of time that the local fire crews met the national guidelines for EMS care. And what that is, it's a national registry, it's a national evaluation. And in Arizona, there's only, I think, 5 departments that have done it. And Daisy Mountain is the only one that has done it as a gold level standard and has also met the standard for EMS with heart attacks and strokes. And there's, specific timelines that I can give you guys that say you have to do this. And then the American Heart Association will track you if you do that. So, for example, we are a gold standard on EMS performance, and we are a recognized heart services or heart performance. And we're the only one in Arizona that has that. Daisy Mountain has that. They're going to continue to track that. with the calls that we go on here in Arizona or here in Cave Creek, so that we can see that our residents are getting the best level of EMS care. It talks about the service they get and the time that it takes to evaluate them and get them to the hospital or get them to the stroke center. So I can give you those guidelines, and I brought some extras for you. But that way we're tracking the three biggest, in my mind anyway, the three biggest emergency issues on the fire side is wildland fire, structure fires, and EMS calls.
Thanks, Jim. I do apologize because we had done multiple updates to this and somehow an old version just got into your presentation. I apologize.
So we've got the one that we've got up there right now. That one's correct, the structure of
Correct.
origin. The AHS, DHS standard, that was in there as well.
Yes.
Okay. And then, sorry. This is one that we added based on conversation that we had with the council. Do you not want that in there?
I was gonna track the impacts that our wildland stuff's having. We're reaching out. That's part of our program.
Okay,
Is to reach out and to do the inspections. We'll continue to do the free inspections. We'll continue to do the brush gatherings and all that type of stuff. But we want to see if what we're doing is working. So as an example, Mary, you mentioned at the last council meeting, we've had 3 or 4 fires already. We've yet to, knock on wood, lose the structure. The crew's response has been great. We've been holding it to the minimum amount of acreage. And for example, one of our fires was about 5 acres and we had 3 of the 5 homes that had defensible space. That played into, that was a good response for us because the community had done some stuff. So we'll be able to track this home did the defensible space, this home didn't. This one had this type of loss, this one didn't. So that's what we're going to track.
So I think what you're doing is substituting the first one for the wildfire. And then you're keeping this one.
We're modifying this one a little bit and substituting the EMS.
In fact, if you look at your packet, what you have, the paper packet, the table's correct. So that's what was originally submitted. I apologize because
Yeah,
we thought that was. in the
on this, I think, especially with wildland fires, and putting them out is fine, but you don't want to test your system. You want to prevention is, I mean, you had 4 already this year. And it's still windy and hot outside, so. And, you know, we have reports of people doing hot work without permits and things like that, so. Yeah, I'm really interested in the preventative aspect. I'm happy with this for this year. But I think we need to get focused on preventing those fires, preventing those ignition sources and reducing fuel needs.
I think on the bottom of that one, we added in also tracking if people had done that, number of citations that we wrote for people that were not following the codes and the guidelines. So we're going to get that message out. I believe that's the last part of that, of the wildland one, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken. Going to your point, or we need to hold people accountable for this. So that was added into what you have in your packet.
so when I update this final version, I will include this in place of the one that
Yes.
in place of the one that's struck out here. We'll leave building of origin, the EMS one. I'm hearing council say, leave this green one in and then add in this additional one.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think
what I'm
the mayor's
hearing?
correct. I mean, part of the thing we want to do here is be preventive. I mean, it's a lot cheaper to have people be preventive than it is to have the insurance pay out.
Yeah.
Or have us pay out.
And then you guys internally can, I don't want to say negotiate, but you can kind of figure out what you want to do with that.
Right. And just so the council knows, we're going to be coming back to the council next month for action on this. So the direction and guidance we get from the council today will come back to you and we'll highlight what has changed as a result of this meeting today. And if Jim has something that is maybe a little bit more workable, then that will be there. If not, then we'll keep what has been presented to you. So I'm just saying Jim, but it could be any of the directors.
Questions, council? Mayor, council, okay. Next area is HR. Thank you. Next area is HR. Obviously, the first measure there is retention of regular full-time employees in the initial probationary period. We want to make sure we track that because we want to be sure that it takes a lot of energy, effort to hire employees. And we want to train them, and we want to make sure that they're retained. So that's a measure that was recommended. Maintain turnover at or below the national average for state and local government. That's a benchmark metric we can measure. Preventable accidents per year is to track accidents and to look at those that could have been preventable. Number of workdays lost due to work-related injuries, and that's the HR measures. I'll stop, ask for questions. Council. Okay, next one is utilities. Cost of water produced and delivered per 1,000 gallons.
If you mean all the, and Sean's, I think he's on the,
Yes.
we're 85% fixed expenses. So if you just pump more water, I guess if you want to say cost of water produced, I'm just not sure how meaningful that is because we're all fixed expenses. Whether you do 1 gallon or 100 million, those fixed expenses don't change. So you can do better just by pumping more water. So, and your water losses, having higher losses also gives you a better number here.
You're right, Mayor. I do think though, from a standpoint of benchmarking, it's always good to kind of see how we compare to other cities. The challenge is, to your point, is our overhead costs are very high for a small town our size. And so the question is it really meaningful information, right?
Yeah.
And
It's something you do something about.
and one of the things,
too noisy. Yeah.
yeah, and one of the things we haven't done such a good job over the years is that our rates have not fully recovered the capital costs and investment that we put into the utilities. And we're starting to get there. I think in the near future, we'll be able to have those be absorbed in the rates. I know why are you having a discussion about rates, but that's all part of the cost of what we charge and what we recover. So do you have something, do you think it just
Well,
should come off, or do you have another idea on
I
that?
think you have two different metrics there, cost of water produced and cost of water delivered. And the reason that you want that is because that's going to show you water losses. So I don't know that I'd want to say, monthly expenditures divided by the thousands of gallons, but I do think you want to differentiate between the amount
Right.
you've produced versus the amount that you've delivered. That is important because that's going to tell you your systemic losses.
Yeah, I think that they need to stay together. That is
Well,
what you're
I'm
saying.
fine with it having in the same.
They are tracked separately. I'm just saying, I
Yeah.
think that the
No,
statement
I
should
think
stay
that's
together.
fine.
Yeah.
And we do have a water loss measure, council member, on the, as part of this that we're going to track.
If you're already tracking the water loss, I'm not sure what utility of I'm not sure what the cost of water produced and delivered, what metric, why that you'd have that metric. The thing you're worried about is the water loss. Whether it's due to broken main, a broken whatever,
Right.
or we just couldn't deliver it.
But, and again, council member, that's a measure, Bill and I correct that, it's a benchmark measure that a lot of other water utilities, even in this region, track. So it's a way to track your costs, whether or not it's relevant here to Cave Creek. It's not essential that it be in, is what I'm hearing.
Well, it's essential we have cost control.
Yeah.
This number is going to be too noisy. It's going to be up and down for reasons that are uncontrollable. The amount that you do, if you have water losses, it actually makes this number look better. So it may be just keep water costs at the rate of inflation or something. I don't know. I haven't thought through this given the fact what the situation we're in, but cost control is absolutely essential. It's essential we have something that's a huge thing for a water company.
Maybe it's something to do with cost of water produced and delivered per 1,000 gallons, less infrastructure cost. Because your infrastructure is going to be the one that fluctuates, right?
Well, it's a good point, but I believe a lot of the other cities, they run these as pure enterprises. And so they're going to roll those costs into their rates. And And then the rates help determine what the cost is for, they have obviously their inputs, you know, that you've got your either your pumping costs or your energy costs, your you know, your CIP costs and delivery. So I think to your point, that's important, but at the same time, the other cities that eventually we're going to be benchmarking will have those rolled into their costs. So,
Well, Sean was here, but I don't know, maybe, I mean, there are all kinds of benchmarks on cost control nationally, internationally, all over. Is this the best one that is out there?
Well, when we, and Mayor and Council, when this was developed, the Utilities Director, you know, had a hand in the development of this. And this is a benchmark that other utilities measure. Now, whether or not there's another benchmark that would be more appropriate to measure costs, that would be something that Sean would have to.
Sean, I went ahead and minimized my screen. You're on there. Are you able to jump in?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the AWA utility benchmark report from 2024 to see what they've got in there. Just that's a national one, as well as I'm looking at a couple other local ones. Yes, in the cost control, we do need to break that down. We'll highlight what we don't include, like if there's a repair, maintenance, and some general repair maintenance you would include, some you don't. It depends on each city as I'm looking out there. So as long as we can define that, I do think it's something that allows us to look at overall efficiencies of the treatment. Like for our cost of water, we would include not the cost of the cap water itself, I would propose, but with the cost of us delivering a 1,000 gallons of raw cap water up to our treatment plant and getting water into NERI, potable water into our NERI site to be distributed. That allows us to do a cost comparison in the future against what the city of Phoenix is charging us, so that we can see how we're going to operate the two different systems. So I do think it is a good measure. There's some other ways we can slice and dice it up, and we just have to be clear on what we're including and not including in that. We have within the fund, the water fund, actually, and the wastewater funds, Desert Hills and Cave Creek Water, we've created account codes that allow us to charge different both costs and include employee costs to the different divisions of work, the water treatment division, distribution, maintenance. So this does allow us we can play with this a little bit more and give council some different options to look at and to see. That's what I was assuming we would do as we move forward and actually start implementing this and figure out what works best for us as a town.
What does WIFA use as their metric?
I'm not familiar with that.
I don't think WIFA would.
I mean, they're the
Probably.
financing arm. I don't know if they get into that or not. I
I
think that they're
mean-
more interested in our finances and our ability to repay a loan. Are you thinking maybe Department of Water Resources or something like that, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, what is the metric that they use? Because we ought to have a similar metric.
Well, I know that the Arizona Department of Water Resources requires us to track the per capita consumption of water, right?
But they also track I think.
Sean, are you up on that?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, we do an annual report to Arizona Department of Water Resources that will track our per capita water use. It's actually broken down by different categories. So that is something that we look at annually, something we can make more presentable for the council to see and the general public to see. Again, one of our goals is to have a year-over-year reduction in the water used by customers. And there's loss unaccounted for breaks and stuff like that is accounted for a little bit differently in there. We're thinking of breaking that out. So we want to be proactive about that. If we have breaks, that's one thing. We do have to flush the systems to maintain water quality. That's things that when we talk about quarterly reports, we break those two items out separately. If we have like a main break that's happening today in Desert Hills, we have that 6-inch main break that's happening today versus us having to flush the system for compliance, or two different things. So there is ways for us to look at it, but we can go back to ADWR because we're in the Phoenix Metro Active Management area. We are required to do our ADW reports annually to show them what our gallon per capita is for residential accounts and then for also non-residential accounts, customers.
And then as far as the Department of Water Resources, the other data, they're also tracking how much water we took, treated, and then delivered, and then they also look at losses as well.
Correct. Yes. So we have standard tables that we actually do annually for them, but we could keep them more updated on a quarterly basis to provide in this. Obviously, they go into a lot of detail. The report that we send to them annually is about a 20-page report. But I think we could summarize a lot of that and format that. And some of it is information we've already given to council in slightly different formats in the quarterly reports.
So it sounds like you can replicate the measures that you're already producing for DWR and
Mhm.
report on them quarterly here, correct, Sean?
Yeah, I think we just keep up more, we typically do that on an annualized basis, but we can look at doing, not all of the, again, so it's a lot of tables they have, but we can replicate a lot of, I think, more useful ones out of that document.
Well, suggesting that we flood the council quarterly with 40 water tables.
No, I wouldn't, no, but we'll highlight that. I think the relevant ones, which are really, is, and an annualized basis, it's hard to see the consumption on a quarterly basis will look out of whack compared to an annual, because we know in the summertime, the consumption goes up. And we don't sub-meter the indoor versus outdoor water use. And even things like peaking and stuff like that can be blended in. It's hard to pull out unless you're looking at multiple years. So some of these things are more of an annualized basis, but we can look at things like, again, water losses, we look at quarterly with council already. And then cost production, and we could look at that, but we'd have to go back and see what we were spending, which I think we have good data to pull that out. And on a quarterly basis, I think it will vary. As the mayor indicated, I think as we produce more water in the summertime to meet summer demands, because we have a fixed cost, chemical usage, electrical usage goes up because we're moving more water, treating more water, but, we're using the same staff members, they might be getting more overtime, so that might blend it in, but the cost in the summer might be a little bit less than the wintertime, just because of the fixed cost of running the system. But we have to look back and see the trends on that. So it's not gonna be a quarter to quarter comparison, it's gonna be a quarter to last equivalent quarter comparison that we'll have to look at and develop.
So rather than the 20 people sitting in this room trying to figure out what the measurements should be, you guys can retool that and bring it back to council.
I want to make a suggestion here. I think this one's too broad, too much noise, too many conflicting things that can happen. I think you got to break the cost down to something like, we know that power cost, that is a marginal variable cost, that cost per gallon. That makes sense, complete sense, because lower's better and you can't manipulate it. The second one is, maybe there are a couple other things. I don't know if it's personnel costs or chemical costs, but I think breaking it down is something that you're sure that when you do it, it's a better number and it doesn't vary for no reason, to get the noise out of it. It's too noisy. I think this is too noisy.
So I just want to, before we end on this one, Mayor, there are other components here, like the average annual water consumption, cost of wastewater collected, treated per 1,000 gallons. And the big one is the water loss measure. I want to make sure the council's okay with those. And the issue is, I'll circle it, is this cost of water produced and delivered per 1,000 gallons, is to get a better measure for that. But I want to make sure there's not issues with the other measures.
I don't have a problem with measuring it, but I don't think it tells you much. I think, I think it's something that's easily put on there, but I don't think it's a metric that you can use to judge how well or poorly we're doing. I would like to keep it in there, but I would also like to figure out the cost control things.
And again, council member, is that the cost of water produced measure?
Well, we have a lot of fixed costs just because, we're still constructing portions of the system, and we're going to have to rehab a significant portion of the system here over the next 5 years. So, we're always facing water main breaks. We're always facing things like that. So those drivers don't tell you much other than we've got an emergency crew out there fixing it. What I would like, I have no problem with the cost of water produced and delivered, but that doesn't tell you anything other than kind of at a macro level. And I agree with the mayor, it's kind of a messy measure. Maybe we can add something that breaks it out by
figure out the 4 or 5 different,
Okay.
Yeah.
variable costs and measure those. Because that'll give us a better sense of how well we are doing. I mean, we can't affect the cost of iron or, pipes or anything else.
Well, let us go back on that one then.
Take the stats.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They're gonna go back.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Excellent.
And I think it's a great point because as both the mayor and Councilmember Rhodes has pointed out, I mean, we're probably one of the smallest water systems that has the water treatment plants and such, and we just don't have the same economies of scale. So these numbers they're nice to track and all that, but in the end, they're not going to be as meaningful to us in making decisions.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's pretty much what every city uses, or every town, cost of water produced and delivered per
Right.
1,000 gallons. So I think we ought to have it there to show this. And then when you show the details, you can say, here's why we're more expensive like that.
So you want to go actually take in the components that add up to that lead to the
Variable components.
variable
yeah.
components. Got it.
That's what
Yeah.
the mayor said, the
Yeah,
variable
variable
components. I
components.
think we need that because that's what everybody looks at, but I think we want a finer level of granularity with the other pieces.
And you're looking for what knob can the utility department turn
Right.
to lower the cost of water? What, that they actually have control over, not mixture of everything, so that, yeah, and power was the one. Put in variable speed pumps, you
Right.
can, lower your power costs. So it brings that kind of thinking into it.
Well, that's very helpful, Mayor. The last item under this is under the utilities to ensure compliance with water and wastewater regulations. Definitely want to track that. You don't want to be surprised on it. So that is in there. Okay, we're moving to fleet now.
I have a question on that. Is that just for the stuff the town does, or we also have septic systems in a lot of areas? So if a septic system overflows, are we supposed to track that too? I think we probably ought to.
Well, it is inclusive, Councilmember, of wastewater regulations. So yeah, wastewater sanitary sewer overflow, SSO, is something we would track using this, and we can break that out separately. Our goal is to have 0 SSOs. We can break that out even further. There's compliance both in the water treatment and distribution system, and there's compliance on wastewater treatment and the generation of effluent that we have in there. It's sort of all combined together, but I would envision, again, giving you numbers on all those different subcomponents within that.
And I think
Our goal.
Pieces, the whole septic systems versus our system, or the portion we're responsible for. You shouldn't get tagged with somebody having a septic tank.
Oh, no, we wouldn't get tagged for no, unless it's our gravity source system overflowing or one of our force mains. That's considered an SSO violation per our permit, because we're not permitted the septic systems aren't permitted by the town. They're permitted by the individual users to the Maricopa County. So it'd just be things like overflows, which, knock on wood, we haven't had any for a while with the improvements we've made in the collection system, but that's something we could track, and we could break that out separately in these separate components. We sort of wrap this one all together, knowing there would probably be some separate numbers that we show to you. We do every quarter and every month, we do a number of compliance and non-compliance testing of the system to try and keep us, out of violation. Several years ago, we actually had to issue letters because of non-compliance for treatment techniques and also TTHM issues, which we're trying to avoid having to go down that path ever again. So.
If we have a certain area in town that has a number of septic systems that continually have problems, maybe we ought to think about putting a sewer in. It gives
Yeah,
us,
it's a good point. We actually showing that with the master plan. There was actually a couple of different areas that we looked at. Could we bring sewers into some certain areas that are within a close proximity of the town's collection system? So that'll be a discussion we'll be having with council here. But there is a cost associated with that. That'll be another discussion how we start that process.
gives us another data point to make decisions.
Yeah.
So the next area. Pause.
Do it on the fly. Thank you.
Or wastewater, I guess, what I'm hearing.
Just put wastewater breakout and let Sean come out.
Yeah, we'll give you the details. Well, we're not responsible for septic. I thought we were just trying to break out water and wastewater regulations components.
Septic is regulated by Maricopa County. Um,
Failures.
But that's not a performance measure though, because you're looking for things that the utility part, they don't have any control over that.
No, I understand, but they should be tracking that. They should be tracking that statistic, because if you have one area, let's say,
Black Mountain. or
Yeah.
Black Mountain, there's 4 or 5 septic systems that overflow there, then we ought to be looking at maybe extending.
Well, I don't even, in trouble with, there are gonna be a lot of things that we look at and report, but that aren't performance. I think that goes on that list because there's nothing they can do about it except, up the priority on, expanding the sewer system in that area.
They can,
Yeah.
household to say, hey, we got a problem, how do you want to fix it?
Yeah, just so council is aware, in Maricopa County actually requires us to issue a letter, so we actually have a bit of a way to track some of these things with septic issues, not failures, but any issues with septic systems, because before they can get a permit, do any work on it, the town issues a letter, so we actually have a tracking system for that already. So yeah, if I'm hearing the council member correctly, we could take that tracking and map it a little bit more and see what's good. Sometimes they happen when people change ownership and they find out they have to do some work on it, or sometimes the same owners, but we actually do issue letters to Maricopa County before Maricopa County issues a letter for them to do work either to repair or replace the system. So I think with what we've got right now, we can, it's maybe not septic system failures and septic system repairs and or failures. I think we already have some information we can pass along. and
If
keep
I
track.
I think Dusty's hit the nail on the head on something, but like the mayor, I'm not sure it really belongs as a performance measure. What I'm thinking is, however, it's very much strategic plan oriented. And so maybe it's just something that's added to the strategic plan as a strategic priority. And it fits more with that. And then we can later on, our budgets and everything could accommodate when it's necessary. We have sufficient money and capital to extend sewer lines in areas. But-
But we have a quarterly report that has
Right.
100 of these things on there that we might monitor and track to see
Mhm.
whether a problem's building up. To me, it goes on that quarterly report because there's nothing you do about it. This is the performance of the department, and so I agree, we need to know about it. And I think that the best way to do that is to put it on the quarterly report.
We'll see if there's a way of wordsmithing this. If not, I do like the idea of tracking it and staying on top of it for sure. And it sounds like we're doing maybe some of this already, but we'll take a look at it. And I think it's a good discussion because we
Well, I-
certainly know of areas that need to be added
A
with
lot of the
sewers.
septic systems, north of the town core, south of the town core, were built 20 to 30 years ago. And they should be in the process of failing because the septic system life expectancy, 20 to 25 years. So I think that's going to become more of a problem. I don't know if it's a performance measure, as you said. I don't know, but that's something that we ought to start tracking and putting on a map so that we can actually see, okay, where are the problem areas?
Right.
I like the mayor's use of the term monitor. Because I don't know that we're measuring them, but we certainly want to monitor them. That's a more realistic idea.
We're not gonna get done if we don't hurry.
Yeah, well, I see your manager nodding, I see Sean nodding, and I agree with you, Councilmember Rhodes, that's an important item to track. And I think that'll be tracked from this point going forward so that you can determine what areas are priority for expansion of sewer. So let's move the fleet. Annual operating and maintenance costs per vehicle, we're going to track that. And we're also going to look at, in public works, where there's a pavement condition index that we're going to start tracking. It's tracked over in most of the cities of Maricopa County. So it'll be something that we can consistently do with them and see where we're at. In the police department, we are going to look at the number of speed violations that are occurring. We're also going to look at any pedestrian and cyclist vehicle accidents that occur. We're going to look at a clearance rate. This is a national standard, a clearance rate for crime by arrest. We're also going to track percentage of short-term rental compliance resolutions within 24 hours, which is very important. And the percentage of short-term rental registration business license compliance, so that when they're complying with their license and requirements. Any questions under that one, council member, before we move to and Mayor, before we move to development services? Development services. We're going to look at the average day of initial plan review for single family homes. We're going to look at average day for initial plan review for commercial. We're going to do a percentage of permits issued within 2 reviews, which would be good. Percentage of second reviews cases that include new items that require a 3rd review. Well, also with items. A percentage of pre-application conferences reviews within 30 days. And percentage of zoning cases, applications to planning commission or public meetings within 100 days. Any questions under development services? Those are all pretty standard items. Last but not least is code enforcement. We're going to look at the percentage of compliance of building code enforcement actions initiated within 30 days. Very important measure. And then finally, the percentage of compliance zoning code enforcement initiated within 30 days. So if there's a citizen that calls in and has a concern, we want to make sure that we are responsive in those areas. Mayor and council, that completes your recommended performance metrics.
So I've got a question on the code enforcement, percentage of complaints, building code enforcement. Shouldn't that be planning and zoning code enforcement rather than just buildings? Because there are other things that we have native plant ordinance, other ordinances that they're not buildings, but they're under that planning and zoning.
Councilmember, so you're right. We don't really have dedicated code enforcement staff per se, and development services obviously is the home for most code violations. However, like as an example, Adam ends up doing a lot of the enforcement activities as well. So I think that's probably why it was split out as just code enforcement. But I have no issue having it under development services, and then they can coordinate obviously with Adam on that. So
Yeah, I just changed the name from building code to
code enforcement.
To
development services.
development services code enforcement.
Okay, development services.
Are we talking about changing, this
Nope.
bold?
Nope.
Just
Where it says building, change it.
just
to-
who's responsible
Right
is
here?
what he's talking about. Yeah. So code enforcement becomes development services.
And also under what? Is it building code enforcement, or do we need to change that?
Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then zoning code enforcement is fine?
That's fine.
Okay.
So is there, I'm interested in the start date. I mean, when do we say, okay, we're headed this way, and when we're going to start tracking the measures in the first quarterly report?
So the plan is we're going to come back to the council next month to have you formally adopt this. Okay. And if, as you know, there was like 1 or 2 we need to kind of fine tune. So we'll have that fine tune and for your blessing. And then we'll start, then through my department staff meetings that I do each week, we'll continue to track and monitor and see how we're tracking on our performance measures and the strategic plan. And I believe what we'll try to do is we will come back to you in the first quarter, which would be September, and do a report. And then I've talked to the gentleman here, and they're going to be facilitating our annual retreat. And so we're going to have them here. Our retreat is going to be not only with an update as to where we are on the strategic plan, but we're also going to have it be pretty heavy into the financial forecast for the next fiscal year and multiple years. And then also give you a preview of what the capital improvement program looks like and the projects. And then just kind of a snapshot of what the operating budget is going to look like for next fiscal year. And then also a number of other maybe policy related items that would be appropriate at the time. So we're looking at January. And then they'll also at that time then check in with the council to see if the strategic plan is still relevant. As you know, we're going to have some dynamics potentially might change with the election. So we might also have different people on council. And so every time you have a change with council, even if it's one or two people, the dynamics change a little bit. And so what they will be doing is checking in with the council to see that the council, most recent council adopted strategic plan is still relevant. And I would suspect most of the cities I've worked in over the years that when that's happened, it's like 90% of it still going to be there, and then other things will be refined, and so that's going to happen. So that's the idea. And we'll use that as another quarterly update for the directors to give you an update as to where we are in accomplishing the items that are in the strategic plan. So does that sound like a game plan? So that's for the next 6 months or so.
But I'm making the assumption that then you're going to take these output and target metrics and turn those into actionable things to do the
It's-
performance metrics for your subordinates. correct?
That's the goal, but again, this is evolving right now. So we're taking the baby steps here and trying to get the measurements in place. They're going to be measuring what we have before us. And the goal that I have is I like to get a dashboard that the public can see on our website, the council can see. And when we do these quarterly updates, you'll see a visual dashboard as how we're accomplishing each of the major strategic numbered priorities.
Council, have any other closing?
Yeah, Bob, I have a comment or two. And first, I'd just like to say how much I appreciate this work. This is worlds ahead of where we were. And what it looks like to me is we're holding accountability within the each of the divisions and measuring those specifics. What I wonder is sort of on the affective side, how do we report the successes here and make the citizens aware of where we're concerned? So, I mean, I guess that's a next step once we have the data and we're able to predict direction from that data. But how do we communicate this with the citizens that we serve? It seems like we're going to come up with a lot of really important ideas. The whole wastewater piece and the CIP that's predicted out there about sewer connections, for example. I know people really wonder about that. And so not only could we celebrate, but we can educate and we can help people look forward to the kind of performance that this council is offering.
I can,
I'll let you jump in.
yeah, let me jump. So quite honestly, I think what you're probably a year ahead of that conversation. You've got to make sure that the operation is running smoothly, that we're we're going to get through some hiccups, and we don't want to celebrate too soon. We don't want to celebrate on the 10-yard line and then drop the ball on the 5.
I
So,
understand.
so I think that conversation is probably better had a year from now. Once everybody things are moving along and you've fine-tuned the measurements, you've had these great conversations where you've said, hey, you know what? We've been measuring this for the last 6 or 9 months and it's useless. So, but we think this is the better way forward, and then start communicating that. And in the strategic plan, if I remember correctly, you've got components in there about communicating better with the, and I'm sorry to look at you, Catherine. But we've got, there's avenues in there to start communicating what the community is doing to the community itself, or what the town is doing to the community. And that's, I think, the time when you want to start celebrating what you're doing and moving forward. So integrating that into your communication plan and then using it going forward. And but I think that conversation is probably better had 9 or 12 months from now.
Just so we don't forget it, Bill, it's a really important piece.
For some reason, I don't think there's a single person sitting on this dais that is going to forget that.
Thanks.
Other comments from council?
Mayor, if I may, I just have one additional comment. So Paul asked me a really good question through email. He would have done it in person, but with him being out of town. And he wanted to kind of follow up and kind of drill down a little bit. And how are we going to have accountability at the staff level? And he had some really good questions on that. And so I had told him one of the things that I would be looking at is updating our performance evaluation instruments that we use, so that right now they're pretty much job description / job duties, and probably job competencies, the competencies that they're required to have in order to do their jobs. And so I told him that I would be looking at also making changes to our instrument. So when we are providing feedback to the employees, one of the areas that we would be looking at is their accomplishment or achievement, or acting towards the assignments that are working towards achieving the strategic priorities that are in the strategic plan. So, and I think it was a very good, enlightened question, but that's got to be all part of it. Because if we're going to be a performance-driven organization and try to be involved in making continuous change, then it actually is a bottom-up kind of thing. Even though what we're doing here is a top-down, it has to be bottom-up, working towards achieving those priorities. So that's what we'll be working on internally for the next step here.
Could I respond to that real quick?
Sure.
I hope that in that process, you do some best practice comparisons on how other organizations
Sure.
do it, because I know for a fact that for 20 years, I had to do annual evaluations, both giving them and receiving them. And now I hear those were a thing of the past, that organizations have verbal evaluations every 90 days, which may be more productive, frankly, than waiting a year. I know we would have interspersed evaluations kind of informally, but the point is there are new ways of conducting evaluations of your employees, and I hope that you look at them all.
No, we certainly will. And I will tell you, when I first came on, I was very surprised that every single employee's evaluation is due like in January of every year. Like, that's crazy. Because we're such a small staff, we don't have a lot, we're very flat. And so I just thought that was really not very efficient and best use of time. You have someone like Sean who has, I don't know, like 20 employees or something like that. And he has to have all those done by January. So I said, no, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the anniversary dates for the employees and when they were hired. And then that way it's overlapping and staggering throughout the year. But to your point, there's a lot of change that have occurred in employee performance. And the best way to provide feedback is always verbally when there's good things that have happened or when they need to be addressed at the time that they occur. And you don't wait a whole year, to your point. So we'll look at the best practices on
Very
that
good.
for sure.
Great. Thank
I'm 100% behind this. I think this is something that will be a turning point in the entire town. And of all the things that this council does or has a hand in, this has the ability to impact things for generations to come. So I'm really in favor of it. And I'm really excited about moving from an activity-based to a results-based. It's just a lot better place to work for the employees too, in my experience. And I want to thank the Bridge Group. I think your expertise, your ability to educate, your ability to facilitate, you're hitting the ball out of the park. So we really appreciate what you brought to the town. And thank you very much. I think I'm really excited about this, so. If without any further business, yeah, meeting adjourned.